Colorado. Well, we turn now to Pakistan. Paramilitary forces have begun a fourth day of assaults on suspected Taliban sites in the northwest region of the country. Troops from the Frontier Corps, bolstered by tanks, armored personnel carriers, and helicopters, battled militants from the mountainous Khyber tribal area just outside Peshawar. It marks the first major Pakistani offensive against Taliban fighters in the Khyber region and the first major military operation since Pakistan's new government came to power in March. The offensive comes as U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, Richard Boucher, arrived in Pakistan for talks with the government. David Barsamian is the founder and host of Alternative Radio, an independent award-winning weekly broadcast based in Boulder, Colorado. He's spent extensive time reporting from abroad, traveling in India, Pakistan, and Iran in the past year. His latest books include Targeting Iran and What We Says Goes. He joins me here in Denver. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Welcome to Colorado.
It's good to be here, David. Talk about the fighting. What should we understand about what's happening in northwest Pakistan?
Well, it's significant that Assistant Secretary of State Richard Boucher is in Islamabad right now, essentially giving orders to the Pakistani government. We pay, you obey. And the U.S. has been pouring billions of dollars into Pakistan over the last 6-7 years. Most of that money has been going to the Pakistani military. This current operation, I believe, is going to set off a tremendous internal conflict inside of Pakistan, already a deeply conflicted society, because many Pakistanis believe that the so-called war on terror is a war on Muslims, it's a war on Islam. And why should Pakistanis be killing other Pakistanis to carry out a U.S. agenda? I think one thing that's important for listeners and viewers to understand is that there's a tremendous sense of humiliation in Pakistan over how they're being treated in a very condescending way. It's almost like the Godfather giving orders. You know, you do this, as I said, we pay the bills, you know, march to our command. And that has created a lot of backlash inside the country.
Can you give us a brief thumbnail history of Pakistan?
Brief thumbnail history. Very brief. Well, since its inception in 1947, it has essentially been a U.S. dependency.
How was Pakistan born as an independent nation?
Pakistan was created out of the division of British India in 1947 into two states, a largely Hindu-dominated India and a largely Muslim-dominated state of Pakistan. Almost immediately from its inception, Pakistan is drawn into the network of U.S. power. It's recruited to be part of SEATO, CENTO, the Baghdad Pact. Pakistani military officers are brought to the United States. It was the classic Latin American model, now applied to South Asia. Historically, the U.S. has always allied itself with militaries in Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean, and now this was being expanded globally and specifically to Pakistan. So what this has meant for Pakistan as a country is that the military has been highly privileged. It has been foreground because of U.S. attention and intention. It has been, you know, lavishly supplied with money and with arms, and at the same time, this has created real fissures in civil society, which hasn't developed along so-called normal lines, whatever that might be.
We're talking to David Barsamian, who's a broadcaster, author, journalist. The border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, what's happening today?
Well, first of all, it's a 2,500-kilometer-long border. Americans have some sense of how difficult it is to control the border along with Mexico. There are various Taliban movements. The Taliban, which means the students, were actually created by the Pakistani ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, probably the most powerful and secretive organization operating inside of Pakistan. This is all an outgrowth, incidentally, to again that context and background, which is so sorely missing in most reporting, of the Great Jihad of the 1980s, when the U.S. brought militants from all over the Islamic world. I remember Iqbal Ahmed telling me once that he saw plane loads and plane loads of these jihadis being brought in from Yemen, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from Algeria, to fight against the Soviet Union. Well, you know, that actions have consequences, and many of the Taliban today and Al-Qaeda as well are not just the actual members from that period, but their sons and grandsons are now fighting.
And the U.S. approach right now to Iran, how does it affect that whole region? How does it affect Pakistan?
Pakistan has a long border with Iran in Baluchistan. When I was in Iran last year, formations across the border from Pakistan blew up a bus, killing more than 20 Iranians. There has been in Pakistani Baluchistan a long-standing resistance to control in Islamabad. There has been an independence movement there. Sy Hersh and others have reported, and I think with credibility, that the U.S. has been funding groups inside of Baluchistan to cross over into Iran, neighboring Iran, to try to create incidents and destabilize the regime in Tehran. Pakistanis have very close affinity with Iran, and any U.S. military action on Iran, I think, will again produce an enormous amount of resentment and already fuel what is called anti-American hatred. It's a little more subtle and complicated than that.
The food riots, David Barsamian, that we've been seeing around the world and the escalating costs of food, how are they playing out in Pakistan now?
There's an acute shortage of atta, which is flour, which is the staple of the Pakistani diet. There are acute shortages of electricity, drinking water, water for irrigation. There's an enormous amount of dislocation and dysfunctioning inside the Pakistani economic system. And this economic system cannot be understood unless we talk about the role of the army inside of the economy. It's quite astonishing to learn and to know that the penetration of the Pakistani army as an economic institution into all facets of life in that country is truly breathtaking, from banks, from strip malls, from housing estates. There's 22 feudal families that have a great deal of land in the country, and I kind of make this quip, quoting the great American philosopher Yogi Berra, that, if you want to understand Pakistan, well, 50% of the country is controlled by these 22 feudal families, and the other 90% is controlled by the military.
And how Pervez Musharraf has remained in power as long as he has, as unpopular as he has? He
is intensely disliked, yet nevertheless he commands the respect and friendship of George W. Bush. The U.S. has backed Musharraf consistently since he overthrew Nawaz Sharif in a military coup d'etat in 1999. Billions of dollars have gone into Pakistan, but the Pakistani people have not seen any of that money. It's all gone into the military sector. And so, again, this has created enormous imbalances inside the country and a huge amount of resentment toward the United States by most Pakistanis who feel the country is being manipulated, that they don't exist. Americans don't, policymakers don't see Pakistanis as a people. They just see them as an instrument to further the U.S. agenda in the region.
Pervez Musharraf and the United States, Benazir Bhutto, the investigation of her death, and how she came back to Pakistan. Put that all together for us as Richard Boucher is in Pakistan today.
Benazir Bhutto was the Prime Minister of Pakistan from 1988 to 91, and then the second term from 93 to 96. Both of her terms were marked by an enormous amount of corruption, particularly involving her husband, Asif Ali Zardari, who is now the titular head of the Pakistan People's Party. One of the internal problems in Pakistan is that the political parties have basically been family-run businesses. They haven't really existed as parts of a much larger organization, and this is exemplified by Benazir Bhutto, who declared herself chairperson for life, and then when she was assassinated on the 27th of December in 2007, in her will, she bequeathed the party to her son. And until her son matures, who's now 20 years old, the party will be run by Asif Ali Zardari. So Pakistan has had a deeply problematic political system, again, from its very origins. And the military has had paramountcy. It has had primacy within the political system. It's been very influential.
And how the U.S. relationship with Musharraf has affected the hunt for Osama bin Laden?
Well, I think one of the reasons that there's been so much pressure from Washington right now on the Pakistani military is time's running out on Bush. And I think one of the things that he and Cheney may be